basic idea. Some people talk first order, second order, third order, and what they mean is we all have a sense of ourself. That's kind of where we left off. So we can imagine these two individuals, let's call them Mr. Green and Miss Blue, both having a sense of themselves and who they are, what they think, what they feel. However, when we talk about second order consciousness, we will talk about, well, Mr. Green might not only have a sense of what he's feeling and what he's thinking, but he may also have a sense of what Miss Blue is thinking or feeling. So the idea is that we literally generate some sort of internal model, some sort of internal simulation that we think captures what somebody else thinks or feels. And of course, the more that we're around that person, the better this model is, the better we would be able to predict how they might act in a certain situation, for example. Now it goes beyond that. Third order, now we have here Mr. Green having a model of what Miss Blue is thinking about Mr. Green. So you can literally, we could say things like, I know what you think I'm thinking. Very convoluted phrase when you kind of unpack that. But I know what you think I'm thinking. The idea is I can model you modeling me. And it really does kind of get convoluted that way. But when we're trying to surprise somebody, for example, let's say it's Valentine's Day and we want to do something that our partner really finds surprising and sweet because of the thought that went into it. Well, sometimes what that thought is literally not doing what they would expect you to do. So they have a model of you, and that model predicts that you're going to behave in certain ways. And so sometimes it's considered especially cute, thoughtful, etc. if you behave in a way that's, I guess, even more sweet or more romantic than this person expected you to on Valentine's Day. Okay, so that's an example of how this can all play out in the real world. Now, the really kind of interesting thing about theory of mind is there's a lot of studies done on this with children. And here's how the studies would work. They would use something called the false belief test. So they would have a box of crayons, and they would begin by asking the child, and let's say about a 3-year-old child, they would ask the child, what do you think is in this box of crayons? And the child would, not surprisingly, typically say, well, crayons. But then the person would open the box and show them something else. And in most of the experiments, it's candles. That in fact, there's candles in the crayon box. And so then they close the crayon box again and they say, okay, now what do you think is in the crayon box? And the child says, candles, because they just saw that. At this point, you bring up Snoopy, who's been under the table, and you tell the child, okay, Snoopy hasn't heard anything we've been talking about. What do you think Snoopy will think is in the box of crayons? And for children 3 years of age and younger, they almost always will answer candles. Snoopy will think there's candles. They seem to think that whatever they know, everybody around them knows. So if they know there's candles in there and not crayons, then that's what Snoopy will think too. And that's what everybody will think. So children 3 years of age and younger have a real difficulty with the concept that what I know may be different from what somebody else knows. And that's the real basis of this theory of mind, right? That you eventually have to be able to model what other people know. These children cannot do it. Somewhere between ages of 3 and 5, they gain this skill. You can ask them that question again, and they can do it. So right around that age is where they seem to develop the ability to model the minds of others. And remember, it was much younger than that when they got their own sense of themselves, a model of themselves. That, we said, was about 1.5 to 2 years. Somewhere in that range they have a sense of themselves. But even then it takes them still another year or more to start to realize that their egocentric view of the world is not shared by everybody else. Kind of cool. Now, of course, this is really critical. I mentioned this notion of pro-social behaviors, that anytime you have a lot of humans living together, it really helps if humans help one another. And a lot of people think this theory of mind is the basis of that, especially via empathy. That this child here, you see, is helping or aiding or comforting this crying child. Why would you comfort a crying child? Well, because she can feel the sorrow. And because she feels the sorrow and can share in that emotional state, then she wants to help the child just as she would like someone to help her if she were in that state. So we have this concept of like a good Samaritan, somebody who helps others when they don't really have to, and yet they do it anyway. And really, what is thought to underlie that is the fact that we can share in their pain. We can share in their feelings. In fact, some theories say we cannot help but share in the feeling. So imagine a situation like the following. Imagine somebody was knocking at your door, and you had a bunch of young children in the house with you, and they're knocking at the door and saying, I don't know where, but somewhere out here there's this wild animal, let's say a wild bear, and it's attacking everything in sight, and it could be anywhere here. You have to open the door and let me in. Now you know if you open the door and let that person in, there is a chance that the bear could get in. And if the bear gets in, your whole family could be at risk. And yet it's very hard to leave the person out there and say, no, I don't want to take the risk. Why? Because you can hear their fear, you feel their fear, and perhaps the only way for you to feel good, for you to feel peace, is for that person to feel good and for that person to feel peace. So if you let them in and close the door, now you can all feel a little bit better. And so, it may be that theory of mind and that the empathy it provides drives us to perform pro-social acts and thereby holds us together as a species, or at least goes against some of our antisocial tendencies.